Give me your picks, give me your insights. I want the bets from Betting Weekly. Because we win, that is our motto. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't win. Don't give us the bird, don't give us your stink eye. We try our best and we're successful. Come watch our show, Bet River sponsors. It's time to start, enjoy the show.
Well, welcome aboard, everyone, to a special Betting Weekly live reaction edition. You with Steve Wyss and Ruairidh Barlow, because there's been some breaking news today in the soccer world. Huge news, really, as big as it can get, that Xabi Alonso and Real Madrid, arguably the biggest club in world soccer, have parted ways. So who better to bring on for some reaction than our man in Madrid, Ruairidh? Shockwaves sent around the Spanish capital today. We were just saying off air there, we didn't expect this to happen when it did. There's usually a bit of forewarning. But Xabi Alonso and Real Madrid parted ways. Is this genuinely mutual consent, as they say, mutual separation? Or sort of, is it an actual firing deep down? What do you think?
Yeah, about as mutual as it gets. Yeah, welcome into everyone. Delighted to be on chaotic Monday, as I was saying. I think that was kind of one of the interesting things, is that usually you kind of get a bit of warning, usually kind of the night before or after a big defeat, like it was to Barcelona in the Spanish Super Cup last night, 3-2. That's kind of what the impulse was behind this, that you usually get a bit of warning. But all of the insiders kind of unanimously were saying, well, Real Madrid have lost, but it's not necessarily going to be the nail in the coffin for Xabi Alonso. And I think the way it seems to have transpired is that Alonso was called into a meeting this morning with Real Madrid, and they kind of looked at it, kind of analysed the season and said, what kind of solutions do you think you've got for this? Maybe sacking you is just kind of the right way to go here. And I think Alonso's response didn't particularly convince them. I think Alonso, well, at least some reports are saying from kind of Marca they were saying that he was tired of kind of having it hanging over him, that every game was kind of his job was under pressure, or if he'd lost this game, then perhaps his job was gone. I think he'd become tired of that. But generally, once you get to that stage, usually projects are kind of in the final throes of their tenure, because once you're in that situation, it's so hard to play your way out of it. And Real Madrid, quite simply, haven't really convinced in the last kind of 2 months. So it's kind of understandable from that point of view.
Yeah, welcoming everyone. Let us know in comments what you think about this decision today from Real Madrid and Xabi Alonso. Ming Chung says Alonso was maybe just a bad fit. Nico Leo, Alonso was promising. Shame he couldn't implement his style. The board got him a few signings and they did not deliver. And below it, we'll talk about him soon. We'll have the exact same issues. Real Brandon King says, I wonder if Liverpool will now seriously consider him despite recent improvements in form. You know, this is a manager who has been perhaps the most highly sought after head coach in the last 2 years, really. So to see it end after just 7 months at Real Madrid, 34 matches in charge, 24 wins, 4 draws, 6 defeats, not terrible. Although this is Real Madrid we're talking about. Standards and expectations are very, very high. It's the first time that Real Madrid have parted company with a coach mid-season, I do believe, since 2019. That was Santiago Solari. And this is not something that happens very often at Real Madrid. I mean, if you go back down in the last 2 decades, only the likes of Rafa Benitez and the Lopetegui mess. Rafa Benitez was fired in January 2016, exactly 10 years ago. But this doesn't usually happen at Real Madrid. Normally, they're the sort of club that make their managerial changes mid-season. But I think a lot of this has come about it's an incredible Super Cup final yesterday. Great game. Brilliant watch, actually. I mean, I think credit to both teams. But afterwards, there was an altercation, well, not an altercation, but an incident on the field. Xabi Alonso wanting to do the right thing as such, give Barcelona this so-called guard of honor or whatever, well done to them. Mbappe seemed to disagree with him seemed to undermine his position. How much of an impact do you think that has had on this decision today?
I think, I'm not sure how much that kind of had an impact on the decision itself, but it is quite emblematic. I mean, Mbappe, for example, is one of the players that I think generally people have thought is more on board with Alonso and more on board with his methods. He was probably the player that was, well, definitely was the player that was performing best under him. But it was kind of emblematic of the fact that Alonso has never really felt like he's had the authority over this dressing room. I mean, we saw Vinicius spat. If you want to go back to an incident that really kicked off this chain of events, it is in that Clásico that Xabi Alonso won. That's his one kind of major win over kind of a direct rival. He did beat Atleti in the midweek in the semi-final as well, but that Clásico was kind of the one big game that Xabi Alonso did win. And what should have been a kind of glorious kind of passage of praise for Alonso after that game was mired by the fact that Vinicius had kind of basically cussed him out in front of the whole Bernabeu. And there was no real consequences for Vinicius. And I think that was the beginning of the end for Alonso, because from that point on, he started to kind of compromise on his ideals. But generally, it was understood, I think, that the authority was not with Xabi Alonso. And we've seen it in the past that Lopetegui was a manager that couldn't kind of exercise control over the dressing room. Benitez similarly didn't really have the respect to the dressing room. And I think the biggest surprise is, for me at least, that Alonso in theory should have been within that Zidane or Ancelotti mode, somebody that automatically has the respect for what he's done, what he's achieved, and generally just kind of what he was as a player himself. Whereas kind of those other managers we kind of discussed there, that was a clear case of the dressing room just not quite kind of buying into it, and it seems Alonso was in that kind of second group.
G. Davis says, didn't think Mbappe could turn Real Madrid into another PSG. Well, at the minute, is Luis Enrique looking like a bit of a genius? Maybe he was a bad fit, but from what Brewery says, maybe an organisation that needs to change as well, says Real Brandon King. Lozatron, good to see you. Real Madrid have too many egos. I've seen that word used a lot. Today, I've used it myself. You can't play 15 players. I wonder if some big names could be sold. Ming Chung thinks Alonso will bounce back soon. He's quality. I do agree there. I think he will bounce back into quite a top job. Has the problem here for Xabi Alonso been the actual tactics that Alonso's employed, or more of a, well, man management thing, I suppose, where he just perhaps has never felt, like you said, he's got the dressing room? Maybe it was his sort of style of tactics. There's nothing wrong with the tactics. Just they don't suit this group of players. They don't want to do it his way. Is that what's happened here?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. But equally, one of the kind of great misconceptions about Carlo Ancelotti's spell in charge was that Ancelotti never tried to press high. He wasn't a modern manager. He didn't do kind of the same things that Alonso would be trying to do with this Real Madrid side. That's not true at all. There's 2 or 3 occasions during his second stint at Real Madrid where Ancelotti did try and implement this high pressing system. And eventually, after kind of 2-3 months of the season, he canned it and said, look, I mean, this isn't working. I mean, Vinicius isn't pressing. You had a kind of a 33, 34-year-old Benzema at that point. There's times in games that we can do this, but this can't be kind of a 90-minute thing. And if you look at Alonso's kind of tenure for the first kind of 15 games of the season, outside of the Atletico Madrid loss, which obviously any 5-2 defeat in a derby is going to severely hamper you. But outside of that, this was working in a kind of inverted commas sense, because they weren't exactly thrilling. They weren't playing great football, but they were winning games. And so they were getting results. So I think it shows you can do this with this Real Madrid squad, but it is an unbalanced squad. And I think for Alonso's kind of style to work in terms of getting that tactical fit, you do need a more balanced team, and that falls on the Real Madrid board. But obviously the kind of justification for Alonso's form to the Real Madrid board can't be, well, you guys have left me short of the midfielder that we've been needing for the last 2 years. There's no player on the right-hand side that's been kind of effective really for Real Madrid, apart from Rodrigo, who we know wants to play on the left-hand side. So yeah, it's been an unbalanced squad for quite some time. I think for the last kind of 2-3 years. I think that was ultimately Ancelotti's downfall. And Alonso has kind of come to the same end in that sense, because he's got an unbalanced squad that doesn't necessarily want to buy into his style of play. He's compromised on his style of play. And then they've come back to kind of the similar problems that caused Ancelotti to end up getting sacked last season.
Real Madrid have already named their new manager, and that is a man called Alvaro Arbeloa. He's not someone I'm particularly that familiar with, but he takes charge now. Real Madrid have got 6 matches in, I think, the next 17 days or something like that. So there's a lot of action going to happen on the field. Tell us more about this new manager, Rory. What can we expect from Real Madrid here in the short term? Now he's straight into the sort of the deep end here. He hasn't got much time this month on the coaching field. It's going to be about matches. Maybe that's a good thing. What do you expect now from Real Madrid for the rest of January?
Yeah, I will say it's a gentle enough start for Arbeloa. I mean, he's got Albacete away in the Copa del Rey. That should be simple enough, so to speak. Levante at home is another kind of relatively simple occasion. Monaco at home in the Champions League. These are games that you would kind of expect to win with or without Alonso. Villarreal away is kind of his first big test. The first time that he's scheduled to face kind of a big rival will either be in the Copa del Rey knockout stages in February, in all likelihood the Champions League knockouts, or Atleti is on the 22nd of March is kind of the first kind of head-to-head in La Liga that he's going to face. So he's got a little bit of time in my view. Arbeloa is an interesting one. He's quite kind of a fiery, wily old fullback he was when he came back to Real Madrid from Liverpool during the day. Actually a teammate of Xabi Alonso's and thought to be kind of very close to Alonso. The kind of slightly comical thing is that the thing that Arbeloa is kind of renowned for in the Real Madrid academy is a high pressing system, which, as we know, did not work under Alonso. That's kind of his thing. I think I saw him compared to Jurgen Klopp in one of the Madrid papers, and that kind of gives you an idea of what I think Real Madrid are maybe looking for, but maybe a little bit more kind of fire than Alonso brought. And I think if you want to contrast the two of these managers, that's the one kind of main difference. Xabi Alonso was described as Real Madrid players by the Real Madrid players as cold, well, off the record as cold. We know how these things get filtered through agents and whatnot, but he's always been kind of cool and collected, a little bit kind of, I'm a professional, I'll do my job, you do yours. Whereas Arbeloa is much more fiery. And I'm actually a little bit annoyed because Tony Freixa, who's kind of a ex-Barcelona director and a bit of a rent-a-quote, I mean, he's on the radio spouting some stuff sometimes that isn't necessarily correct, but he has kind of stolen my thunder here and said that this is a return to the Mourinho era at Real Madrid. And I do think that is probably one of Arbeloa's attributes that Real Madrid quite like. Florentino Perez has always had a soft spot for Mourinho. Arbeloa was one of Mourinho's very loyal lieutenants. He seems to have that little bit more passion, that little bit more willingness to wear his heart on his sleeve. And maybe that does connect a little bit more with this Real Madrid side. We'll see what happens with that. But certainly in terms of kind of club messaging, he's not afraid to criticize the referees. He's not afraid to kind of puff out his chest and say, we're Real Madrid, that kind of thing. So I think he will be able to rile up the fan base at the very least and say the right things to Florentino Perez, of course, the president, but also the Real Madrid hierarchy in order to get people on side early on. Obviously, that needs to be followed by kind of results and a little bit of an improvement in play, but that gives you kind of an idea of what to expect with Arbeloa. But yeah, the pressing thing is ultimately the thing that's been the biggest flaw for Real Madrid over the last kind of 3-4 years.
Mm. Well, yes, it is. And, you know, this group of players right now, I'm not sure they suit that sort of system. I mean, it's one of those, I think they're a unique case, this group of players, where they don't necessarily need a brilliant tactician, a brilliant technical coach. It's about, there's so many egos here. Are this group kind of unmanageable to most normal bosses, really? Because they're just not going to listen. If they're not listening to Xabi Alonso, you know, forget his managerial credentials for a start. He's got a history at the club as, I'm not saying legendary, but very, very well respected. You know, he's not some nobody. If they're not listening to him, then I just don't know. It feels like they're only ever going to really bow down to the living legends of the game, like your Zidans of this world, and, you know, obviously Ancelotti. It's like, what will it take? You know, this new manager is going to have to use his personal skills, surely, to, you know, he's going to probably have to bow down to some of the players' demands to get the best out of them. You know, Mings asked there, are they going to be more attacking now? Will he tailor his sort of tactics and approach to sort of please the likes of your Viniciuses and Mbappes of this world, do you think?
I think the ingredients are there for, I mean, in theory, the ingredients are there for both of these sides, and one side being Arbeloa, one side being the Real Madrid Stars, to kind of put out the olive branch, because they're going to need to, because ultimately Real Madrid are still in the Champions League. They're in the Copa del Rey. They're not that far off in La Liga. They still want to win games, and having not necessarily got rid of Alonso, that's the wrong phrasing, but certainly contributed their piece. I think if you're a player, you can't, certainly very early on, be shown to be kind of getting rid of Arbeloa as well. You need to kind of behave yourself in a certain aspect if you're a player, because Florentino Perez is going to look at it and say, well, if you're the problem, then I'm going to get rid of you next. Obviously, it's easier to get rid of managers, and that's what Real Madrid tend to do, but 2 in a row is quite dramatic. And similarly, with Arbeloa, he will go into this knowing that he has to find a way to get Mbappe, Vinicius, Valverde, to get these players on side. And he'll be able to learn from kind of the error of Alonso's ways to a certain aspect of that. So he'll come in fully kind of aware of what's been going on at the club. He'll be very connected. He'll know all the ins and outs of these kind of dramas that have been happening, whereas Alonso maybe coming in a little bit colder in another sense, not knowing quite exactly what was going on in the dressing room. I think Arbeloa will have more knowledge of that. So he'll be able to manage that in theory better, or manage around it better. Whether he can kind of long-term do it is a different question. But ultimately, any manager in any football club, if you can convince the players to kind of follow your idea, then that's how you kind of get results. And if you can do that, then that's fine. What the idea is doesn't really matter too much, but you need to be able to convince them to do it on your behalf. Otherwise, you end up as a sitting duck.
Do you think now, like I said, there's a lot of matches coming up quickly? Could we get an instant spike? I mean, not that the results have been that bad, but could we suddenly get a real spike in terms of performances? It's like the players might just think, we've got to perform now. He's out the door. We've got to show what we can do. There's going to be people watching who are thinking, right, is now the time to side with Real Madrid? Do we expect a really hot sort of run from them now? At the end of the day, they're only 4 points off Barcelona at the top of La Liga. In the Champions League, they're the 7th favourites to win the Champions League with Bet Rivers at 10-1. But this is still one of the best teams in Europe, one of the top 10 teams in Europe. What is the fans' reaction, Rory, so far that you've seen? Are they happy with this? Are they now going to get behind the new manager very, very quickly, do you think?
Yeah, it's difficult to tell. I mean, I think the online reaction is always a little bit less nuanced than perhaps the reaction that you get in the stadium or on the street. I think there is a kind of growing feeling within the Spanish capital that there are holes in this squad as well. Maybe this is just me projecting it because it's my feeling, but there are holes in this squad that the dressing room is difficult to manage. And even if Alonso wasn't necessarily perfect and perhaps made some mistakes, that not all of this was his fault. And if you look at it, I mean, Vinicius performed very well in that Super Cup, but has been completely out of form for a year. Mbappe has been very good, but Real Madrid look much more coherent when he's not in the team sometimes, because he's so idiosyncratic in the way he plays a number 9 position. Rodrigo has just kind of returned to form as well, but he's been out of form for a good year as well. So there's a lot of players that aren't necessarily performing. Camavinga, another one who's not taken the step. Tchouaméni has kind of returned to form under Alonso, but before that was struggling. Housen, even, who's come in for 50 million, he kind of had a good start, but is not performing either. And you can look at that in 2 ways as well, because you can say, well, these players aren't performing for Alonso, and that's part of the reason that he's gone, because you need to show improvement in these players. But yeah, I do think you could get a spike in results, because ultimately any kind of release of tension, if you let the air out of the balloon, that's going to help things around the dressing room, and you give the manager a fresh start and see what his ideas are. Ultimately, this is a Real Madrid side that just beat Betis 5-1, that just beat Atletico Madrid 2-1, that lost to Barcelona, but only narrowly. So they're probably only 10-20% off where they need to be to compete for La Liga, to compete in the Copa del Rey, and maybe get to kind of the quarterfinals, semi-finals of the Champions League. So I think it's a side that are still going to be very flawed, but I do think you could see them kind of come into March, April, still in the running for all 3 competitions.
Yeah, Albacete are going to be the first team in the firing line on Wednesday in the Copa del Rey. Then Paul Levante get to face the wrath of this Real Madrid team. I mean, Arbeloa, do you just see him, Rory? I mean, I just feel like it could be the sort of appointment that takes them to the end of the season. And if they get in the summer, unless he does incredible stuff, that in the summer they will just go for the manager that they want. That's how I personally see it. No offense to the new manager. But who do you actually believe yourself would be the best sort of candidates to manage this group at Real Madrid right now? Because I'm at a bit of a loss who is kind of left that's new, that could do it. I mean, Xabi Alonso, I rate him so highly, and I think he's going to have a great coaching career. There's not many that I feel could come in here now, but maybe you've got some better ideas than me. Fire ahead if you've got any ideas.
Yeah, it's a head scratcher, certainly. I mean, one thing that does work in Arbeloa's favour, I should mention, is that Florentino Perez, the president, loves him. And so he's been close to Perez for years and years and years, ever since he left as a player. So that is going to help him. Whereas Alonso, I don't think quite had that connection. He wasn't a blood brother of Perez, so to speak. So that will help him, and that will perhaps maybe lend him a little bit more authority. But yeah, you talk about that authority in the dressing room. Ancelotti was so good at winning the affection of his players and getting them to play for him, regardless of what the system was or what he asked them to do. I think it got a bit tired at the end. You can't really blame Ancelotti for it too much, in my view, although he did make mistakes too. But yeah, it is a very interesting one. I don't think there's a clear candidate. Jurgen Klopp always gets brought up because he's kind of well liked by some of the Real Madrid hierarchy.
That's a good one. Jurgen Klopp could be the one, actually, but who knows what mentality he's in.
Yeah, I don't think Klopp wants the stress, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's a stressful job. And I mean, managing upwards, managing Florentino Perez is probably as hard a job as it is managing downwards if you're Jurgen Klopp as well. So I'm not sure Klopp necessarily wants that on his plate just now. Ancelotti and Zidane are the two managers since Mourinho, and Mourinho obviously came in at the top of the game when he did it as well. They're the two managers that have been successful at Real Madrid. They've both been player managers. They've both been able to kind of be whispered in their ear and say the right things, and it's worked for them. Outside of that, we've not really seen success at Real Madrid. And one of the interesting things about Alonso is that he was kind of meant to be not the Guardiola answer necessarily, but a system manager. Klopp or Guardiola or one of these managers that has kind of a set out system. And that's obviously not worked, part which we've discussed kind of due to some of the kind of falling out with players and some of the players wanting to play in a different way. But more of the interesting thing for me here is that, I mean, Jude Bellingham said in midweek, I mean, look, we're not doing well, but it's not a disaster. We're 4 points off in La Liga. We're not doing too badly. We beat them in the Clásico before when he was talking about Barcelona. And so the thing that's got Alonso dismissed is not necessarily the results, which is usually the case at Real Madrid, but it's the feeling of how they played. So yeah, Alonso was brought in to be the system manager to improve the way they play, rather than kind of Ancelotti, who was very much kind of whatever way wins works. And yeah, that's the thing that's got him sacked. But I don't think there is a clear answer today in world football apart from Ancelotti and Zidane, who I don't think are going to come back. So yeah, it's a difficult one for Alonso, for Real Madrid, and yeah, there's no clear pathway forward for them in my view.
It's very hard because not many really, really top elite players are managers anymore, because they don't need to be. They do other things in life. So it's an interesting one. It's a tough one for Real Madrid. Lozatron says Alonso to replace Pep if he goes at Man City. Feels like City could do with something new or different. That's the final question I'm going to ask you, actually, Rory, here, because the Premier League is absolutely nuts for managerial merry-go-rounds this season. Which of the top clubs in England would be the best fit for Xabi Alonso? I'm talking here Man United, Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, possibly even Spurs. Because I think all of those, none of those managers, I don't want to use the word unsafe, but there could be potential changes coming on there in the next year and a half. Liverpool's the obvious answer, but what, with him being like a system manager, knowing your knowledge of certain clubs, where could he potentially land in England?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of going on, continuing your point earlier as well, sacking Xabi Alonso is just like, who do you get in? And we just said that there's no kind of clear answer, and that's because Xabi Alonso was the one, essentially. Yes. He was the one that everybody wanted. Bayern offered him a job. Liverpool offered him the job before Slot came in. And Manchester City have also kind of earmarked him as a potential Pep replacement. I think, having had the Real Madrid experience, I think he will want plenty of control. And I think the one place that you're going to get that is maybe Manchester City, which will give you the keys, will give you a lot of power over player decisions, and more or less say, this is your ship to run. Whether they do that in the same way as they've done with Pep, because Pep is Pep and he kind of came in with the reputation that he had, I don't know, but that seems the most likely to certainly meet his needs. That said, I think Liverpool is the other one. I mean, I think Alonso has made very little secret of the fact that he would probably quite like to manage Liverpool. He mentioned it before the Champions League tie between the two earlier this season. He said, look, I'm a Real Madrid manager now. I'm focused on this, but who knows in the future what might happen. And that's very much, I think, an indication that if Liverpool were to go for him, I think they would have the best chance of getting him. After that, City and Bayern are probably the two clubs that I think are most likely to have a shot.
Yeah, the slot machine suddenly might be just having not sleeping quite as easily as he was. There's a little bit of scrutiny on him this season. Now that Alonso is on the market, there will be whispers, there will be words. How many trophies are Real Madrid going to win this season, Rory, do you think? Let's have a number.
Oh, that's a good question. I think they will win the Copa del Rey. I think they'll win one.
That is exactly what I think as well. I don't think they've got enough in the Liga. I don't think they've got enough in the Champions League, although they've got a great history in it. But I think they're going to have to win something. They've got to win something, and the Copa del Rey is the best answer. Thanks, Rory, for your thoughts on this huge news today of Real Madrid and Xabi Alonso parting ways. Thanks to anyone who joined live or on demand. Put it in the comments if you're watching on the replay. Who do you think would really be the best fit for Real Madrid? How do you think it's going to go under Arbeloa? Where did it go wrong under Xabi Alonso? And are you going to be tailing Real Madrid over the next few weeks? Because, like I said, there's a lot of soccer coming up on the field. Please do like the video if you enjoyed what you saw, and anyone new in would appreciate any subscriptions. So thanks very much, Roy. We will see you soon on Betting Weekly Live. And take care, everyone, and enjoy the next few days, Roy. It's going to be absolutely crazy out there for you in Madrid.
Yeah,
see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.